Hey, it's me, MLB. Here is chapter 44 of BNHA, second generation, and this one is titled Shot. Chee! She gasped as his body went limp. Chee! The next thing that happened was a flash of white and another gunshot, the flash of white suddenly becoming tinged with red. Ginny screamed, clutching Chee's body to hers as she tried to process what was happening. Hiyoko was in front of her, with his back to her, his wing bones snapped and hanging down as he looked up at the vent and then turned and grabbed her and Chi. Amid a lot of pain, using his broken wing, he flew back out the door and dropped both of them down on the ground outside with the other workers. "Condor!" a customer gasped. "You're injured!" "I need to get Todoroki out," Hiyoko said to Ginny as she continued to hold an unconscious and bleeding Chi. "Call for an ambulance," he addressed Ginny. The poor girl was shaking uncontrollably, still clutching her unconscious friend and babbling incoherently. "Nugs!" a deep voice rang out over the terrified and confused chatter of the bystanders. Hiyoko looked up when he heard the familiar voice and looked straight into the worried eyes of Uncle Anthony. As he froze for a second, Kana appeared, running into the fray. "You are hurt! You are hurt!" he signed on repeat. "Don't go back in!" "Ambulance is on its way!" another person shouted. Just then sirens could be heard in the distance. "Police are coming!" another person yelled. "Chee! No, wake up!" Ginny wailed, adjusting Chi in her lap and turning his face towards hers so that she could try and pat his cheek gently to get him to come to. "Please, Condor, help! Help, he's been shot as well!" Back inside the building, Todoroki stirred. His head was thumping heavily as his hearing came back to him and he groaned and sat up. At first it sounded like everything was underwater, but slowly things became clearer and he was suddenly cognizant of the sounds of sirens in the distance. Was it all over? Did they catch him? He groggily looked around, down the empty back hall, and touched his eyebrow, the sting of his fingers touching the split in his skin, making him wince, and he pulled his hand back to look at it. Blood trickled down his fingers and into his palm. Ouch. He let his arm fall to his side and tried to get his legs underneath him to stand up. They were very shaky and heavy. Where is everyone? Are they all outside? It was then that he heard Ginny's voice screaming from the front of the building. "Help! Kondochi's been shot as well!" Soshi's heart twisted in his chest and he pulled himself up, using the wall for balance, and held on to it as he turned to head down the hall. No. Who shot him? He can't die. He dragged his legs, one after the other, eyes focused on the end of the hall. Just then he heard a sound overhead and stopped, looking up as the sound moved through the ceiling over him, then stopped at a vent above the door to the jewellery vault. The thief? He's still here? They haven't caught him yet? He paused, waiting to see if the man would show himself. Suddenly the vent door came crashing open, and a middle-aged, slim-looking man fell through the hole and landed on the ground. The man, upon seeing someone in the corner of his eye, turned his head to look at Soshi, unsure for a second of what to do. Then he reached for his gun and quickly drew it. Soshi saw the gun being pulled out and immediately shot a blockade of ice at the thief, managing to thwart the gun wielder's first attack, but not enough to immobilize him, as Kujin jumped out of the way, dropping his gun as he evaded the wall of ice. "Surrender!" Soshi called loudly in a shaking voice, holding his arms up to be ready to make the next ice item. Suddenly his arms were flung to the side as Kujin used his quirk, the villain holding his hands up marionette style and working Soshi's body like a puppet on a string. Soshi tried to stop him from being moved by Kujin, but it was no use. He was a literal puppet in Kujin's hand. "You meddling kid should stay out of this," Kujin sneered. "I won't hesitate to kill you all. I've already killed one." Soshi's eyes flung open, rage building inside him on behalf of his fallen comrade. "No!" he screamed, shooting an arrow of ice at Kujin and getting the man in the leg. Kujin let out a scream and used one of his hands to hold his leg, which allowed Soshi to move a little freer and make an ice chain to wrap around Kujin's body, deploying it and slamming his arms to his side and thus deactivating his quirk. Kujin toppled backwards, wriggling to get free, but it was no use. "Police!" a loud voice called into the empty building. "Here!" Soshi called back. The ice student managed to stay conscious long enough to see 4 police pile onto Kujin and put cuffs on him. Then he blacked out. Ginny had been crying non-stop. She was now at the district hospital in one of the beds receiving IV fluids through a cannula, and although she was physically fine, aside from quirk exhaustion, she was mentally scarred. "Nurse!" she wailed. Where's Chi? Is he okay? Where did they take him? I need to see him. An older nurse came in and gave her a caring smile. Miss Kirishima, please rest. The boy you came in with has been taken for emergency surgery, and that's all I can tell you for now, she said, patting Ginny's hand and checking the leads on her. Ginny sobbed harder. Is he gonna die? He saved me. He can't die, she wailed again, her body on the edge of going into shock. I will go and make inquiries, the nurse replied, leaving Ginny alone once again. As the nurse left, Condor emerged, his broken wing in a temporary cast. Condor! Ginny sobbed. Where's Chi? Is he gonna be okay? He needs to be alive. The winged hero walked over and wrapped one arm around her, giving her a much-needed hug at that moment. The poor girl was shaking like a leaf in the wind. Kirishima, let's trust the doctors that are doing their best, he said softly. I've notified the parents of yourself and the boys. They'll be on their way in now. Soshi! Ginny suddenly gasped. Where's Soshi? Soshi was the one who caught Kujun. He's here now, getting a few stitches in his eyebrow and some IV fluids, Hiyoko said. I'm going to go and check on him in a second. That would actually be a really traumatic experience for these poor kids. Anyway, stay tuned for the next chapter coming tomorrow.